He walked into the courtroom a trembling witness. Skinny, scared, clutching a truth no one wanted to hear. The judge stared, frozen. Because before she was Judge Eleanor Hayes, she was Ellie. And that boy on the stand? He once swore he'd marry her under the willow tree. What happens next would shake the foundation of her courtroom, and the system built to silence voices like his. The courtroom door opened with a slow groan. Every eye turned. A young man stepped inside, tall but tired, hoodie drawn tight, shoulders squared like he knew what came next. The bailiff called his name. Darius Freeman. Eleanor didn't move, didn't blink. But inside, something cracked. She hadn't heard that name out loud in over 2 decades, not since the summer before middle school when they'd played stickball in the alley until the streetlights buzzed on. Darius had been her shadow, her protector, her partner in every bad idea and every whispered secret. And then he was gone. Just another name her mother erased when they moved. Now he was here, and he wasn't 12 anymore. He walked toward the witness stand with a careful, measured pace. Not afraid, just cautious. Like every step carried a story. He took the oath without flinching, eyes flicking to the prosecution, the defense, and finally, to her. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the courtroom disappeared. He had the same eyes. Dark, watchful, the kind that saw too much even back then. The kind that had seen her cry when her father slammed the door one too many times. The kind that used to light up when she dared him to jump the fence behind the laundromat. Now they were dulled. Not broken, but dulled by time and wear. The prosecutor cleared his throat. Mr. Freeman, were you present at the scene of the incident on March 3rd? Yes. His voice was calm, deeper than she remembered. It filled the room. Can you tell the court what you witnessed? Darius took a breath. I saw a teenager getting slammed against a cooler. Saw James Anderson step in, calm, hands up, no aggression, just trying to protect the kid. The DA leaned forward, trying to poke holes. You have a record, don't you, Mr. Freeman? Darius didn't flinch. I have a past. That doesn't make me blind. Eleanor's grip on the bench tightened. She knew what came next. They'd try to discredit him, turn his truth into noise. But she couldn't let them. Not this time. Not when the boy who once gave her half his lunch was the man on the stand. When court recessed, she didn't rise right away. Darius stepped down, eyes flicking to her once more. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked, and in that look was everything. You see me? Yes, she did. For the first time in 25 years, she really did. Darius shifted in the witness chair, fingers clutched tight around the edge like it might keep him grounded. The courtroom felt colder now, quieter somehow, like it was holding its breath. I was there, he said, voice low but steady. Saw the kid backing up, hands up, scared. And I saw the officer shove him. Hard. James didn't do nothing but say, hey, he's just a kid. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't threaten nobody. The prosecutor paced, slow and deliberate, like a shark circling prey. Mr. Freeman, he began, flipping pages for show. You've been arrested before, haven't you? Objection rose from the defense, sharp and immediate. Overruled. Darius didn't look away. Yeah, he said. I've made mistakes. Doesn't mean I didn't see what I saw. And those mistakes, the prosecutor continued, his voice a silk-covered blade, include 2 misdemeanors and a felony. Would you call yourself a credible witness, Mr. Freeman? Darius leaned in just slightly. Credibility's not about my past. It's about the truth. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The prosecutor's mouth twitched, like he hadn't expected him to bite back. Judge Hayes sat still, hands folded neatly, but her heart pounded like a gavel inside her chest. Darius had always been fire and tenderness wrapped into one. She still remembered the night the upstairs unit caught fire, the smoke thick and crawling through the vents. It wasn't her mother who yanked her from that apartment. It was him, 10 years old, barefoot, crying, but brave. Now he was up there again, Only this time the flames were the kind you couldn't see. Built from bias and silence and buried evidence. The prosecutor took one more swing. So you expect us to believe that a man with your record just happened to be in the store, witnessed the entire incident, and now has nothing to gain from this? Darius didn't blink. I didn't come here to gain. I came here so that boy doesn't end up where I did. That's it. Silence. Judge Hayes felt the weight of every eye turning toward her. She kept her face calm, but her fingers dug into the wood of the bench. This wasn't just testimony. It was a reckoning. He was still that boy, her boy, pulling people out of burning buildings. Only this time, he was the one getting burned. She took a breath, measured, controlled. "Thank you, Mr. Freeman," she said, voice even. But inside, something was unraveling. Because truth like that didn't belong to the past. It belonged to now. And now was demanding she decide what kind of judge, what kind of person she really was. The attic smelled like dust and forgotten summers. Eleanor climbed the narrow steps slowly, each one creaking under the weight of memory. She hadn't been up here in years. Not since before law school. Not since before she learned how to lock doors inside herself and throw away the keys. Boxes were stacked like monuments to a life she didn't visit anymore. She found the one she was looking for tucked behind an old lamp and a cracked mirror. A shoebox, blue and faded, rubber bands holding its corners like fragile promises. She sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, the air thick with silence. Her fingers trembled as she peeled it open. Polaroids. A cracked friendship bracelet. The cap from a grape soda bottle. And then, envelopes. 5 of them, dog-eared and addressed in crooked pencil. Ellie. She didn't breathe as she opened the first one. "I waited for you again today. You didn't come back. They said you moved. I thought maybe you were mad at me. Did I do something wrong?" The words were jagged, like they'd been written in a rush. Like he hadn't known what to say, only that he had to say something. Eleanor's throat tightened. She opened the second. "It's weird not having you here. I still sit under the porch steps sometimes. I pretend we're playing cards like before. The house feels louder without you." She swallowed hard. The third letter had a stain. Grape soda, maybe, or tears. "I miss your laugh. Nobody laughs like that here. I made a new comic. I was going to show you. Maybe I still will." By the fourth, the handwriting had changed. Straight. Sadder. People stop waiting eventually. "I don't know if I have or not. But I still keep the bracelet. Dumb, right? And the last, you were the only one who saw me." That one shattered her. Eleanor clutched the letters to her chest, her head bowed, the floor cold beneath her legs. She'd left without warning. One night she'd gone to bed in West Philly, and by morning, she was in a different zip code with a different life. Her mother had said it was for the best, safer, cleaner, better. She'd believed it. Until now. Until Darius, her Darius, stood in her courtroom, testifying with a voice full of scars and truth, and eyes that still asked if she remembered him. She did. And now that truth, the one sealed in pencil and silence, was pushing against the walls she'd built. She wiped her eyes, folded the letters gently, and placed them back in the box. He hadn't disappeared. He'd waited. And now she had to decide whether she was strong enough to stop running. The hallway outside her chambers buzzed with urgency, heels on tile, clipped voices, phones vibrating in coat pockets. Eleanor didn't flinch. She sat at her desk, hands folded, eyes locked on the motion in front of her. Motion to strike witness testimony, Darius Freeman. The DA's argument was cold and calculated. His record disqualifies him from objective testimony. He has a personal connection to the defendant. He's not credible. She read the words twice, then once more. Not because she didn't understand, but because they said exactly what they meant, just not in ink. They weren't afraid Darius lied. They were afraid he told the truth. She picked up the phone. "Can you come to my chambers? Now." 10 minutes later, a clerk stepped inside, hesitant but ready. Eleanor didn't ask for an explanation, just held out her hand. The clerk placed a small USB drive in her palm. From the internal archives. They didn't label it. Didn't delete it either. Guess they thought no one would ask. Eleanor nodded once. No smile, just quiet understanding. Thank you. You didn't see this. The clerk paused. They always assume we're invisible. Sometimes that's the only reason the truth survives. The door closed softly behind them. Eleanor inserted the drive. The video loaded slowly, grainy, time-stamped, choppy. A fluorescent-lit aisle. Chips, soda, humming coolers. A teen, back pressed against the glass. An officer yelling. The boy's hands up, still. Then James, calm, stepping in. One hand raised in peace, one voice steady. He's just a kid. No aggression, no resistance. Then a baton swung down, fast, brutal. James shielded the boy. The screen went black. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she paused the clip. She leaned back in her chair, the image frozen on her screen, the truth suspended mid-swing. This wasn't defense. It was defense of a child. It was instinct. It was human. And they'd tried to erase it. By 3 p.m., she called for recess. The DA protested. Your Honor, I object to the introduction of undisclosed evidence. Objection noted, she said, voice like a blade wrapped in velvet. We'll reconvene tomorrow. In her chambers, the weight finally settled in her bones. They wanted Darius gone not because he couldn't be trusted, but because someone had finally trusted him enough to listen, to believe. And now they were scrambling. Good. Because buried stories don't stay buried forever. Not when the people who carry them are done staying silent. She clicked the USB closed, slid it back into its case, and locked it in her drawer. Tomorrow, the court would see the footage. And for once, they wouldn't be watching a version. They'd be watching the truth. The lights dimmed slightly as the bailiff rolled the monitor to the center of the courtroom. No one moved. Even the shuffle of legal pads and coughs and chair creaks, the usual soundtrack of a trial, fell away. Eleanor gave a small nod. Play the footage. A grainy image flickered to life. The timestamp marked 7:36 p.m. The corner store came into view. Aisles narrow, lights buzzing overhead, a teen near the refrigerated section. His hands were up. His back hit the cooler hard. An officer loomed, yelling words that didn't make it into the audio. And then James. He stepped into the frame like he didn't have time to be afraid. One hand out, no fists, no raised voice, just presence. He's just a kid, the faint audio caught. Then came the blur. Another figure, an officer, rushed from the side. The camera jostled. A baton raised, fast and hard. James moved first, arms out, shielding. The screen went black. The room didn't breathe. Eleanor felt it in her bones. That exact second the story they'd been sold collapsed. No aggressive man. No threatening gestures. Just a bystander who refused to let a child be swallowed whole. Darius sat at the edge of the gallery. Still. Silent. His hands clenched white in his lap. The defense attorney turned slowly to the prosecution. We move to reaffirm the validity of Mr. Freeman's testimony, Your Honor. The DA didn't speak. Couldn't. Eleanor's throat tightened. She glanced down at her notes, then back at the room. Her voice was quieter than usual, but it didn't waver. The testimony stands. The silence shattered. The gallery erupted. Gasps, murmurs, someone whispering. Finally! A few clapped before catching themselves. Reporters jolted into motion, pens scribbling, cameras clicking like gunfire. The prosecutor rose, his voice brittle. Objection! This isn't admissible without— Your objection is overruled, Eleanor said, firmer now. You had the footage. You buried it. The courtroom stilled again, but the damage was done. The truth was out. Not the version with crossed-out lines and rewritten intentions. The real one. The one the system didn't want seen. Eleanor stared out at the faces in the room, some stunned, some vindicated, some still calculating how to spin it back. Too late. She looked at Darius. He met her gaze, just for a second. Not with triumph, but with relief, with weight finally lifted. Eleanor adjusted the gavel in her grip, didn't use it. She didn't need to. Because today, the sound that mattered wasn't wood striking wood. It was silence giving way to truth. And now that it had been seen, it couldn't be unseen. The steps of the courthouse no longer echoed. They pulsed, with chants, with footsteps, with voices that had waited too long to be heard. Reporters swarmed the entrance, cameras angled like weapons, microphones pointed like accusations. "Is Judge Hayes fit to rule impartially?" one headline read. "Has the court lost control?" asked another. Inside, the walls felt tighter, the air heavier. Old neighbors came anyway, from West Philly and further. They didn't need invites. They brought stories. "He fixed my radiator for free when I couldn't pay," said a woman with gray in her braids, her voice steady. "He helped my son study for his GED, said another, holding a picture of James at a beat-up kitchen table, books spread between grease-stained hands. "He looked out for us," someone murmured, "when nobody else did." They weren't speaking for sympathy. They were testifying, in their own way. Meanwhile, in the conference room down the hall, Judge Hayes sat in front of a long table lined with suits and silence. "You crossed a line," one of them said, voice clipped, "by engaging beyond your role. You're not an investigator. You're not a public advocate." Eleanor didn't flinch. "That line," she said, "was drawn in the wrong place." A beat of silence. Another leaned in, quieter but sharper. "You've complicated the perception of neutrality." She met his gaze. "Justice isn't neutral when the system isn't." One of them scoffed. "And who decides that?" "I don't," she said. "The truth does." The panel shifted uncomfortably. The room felt like it might implode from the weight of what none of them wanted to say out loud, that they weren't upset she'd broken rules. They were upset she'd broken silence. She stood to leave. Her robe felt heavier than ever, but not in the way they expected. Not from shame. From responsibility. Outside her window, a boy held a sign that simply read, "We saw it too." Inside her chambers, she sat for a long time without speaking, without writing, just listening. To the crowd. To the past. To the part of herself she'd buried years ago, under degrees and titles and caution. Justice didn't begin and end with gavels. It began when someone stopped pretending the rules had ever been fair, and started listening instead. The courtroom was nearly empty now. The reporters had drifted out. The lawyers had gathered their files and moved on. Even the gallery, once packed tight with tension and bodies and history, had thinned to whispers and coat zippers. But Eleanor stayed. The bench that once felt like armor now felt like a threshold. She sat behind it a moment longer, fingers resting on the wood. The ruling had been clear. Charges dropped. Case dismissed. Independent investigation launched. The gavel had fallen. But this silence, felt louder than anything that came before it. Darius approached slowly, hands in his pockets, shoulders still high like he wasn't quite sure he was allowed to exhale yet. She watched him come, eyes steady. Not the judge now. Just Eleanor. Just the girl who used to race him down cracked sidewalks, who once held his hand in the smoke-filled dark. "You heard me this time," he said quietly. She nodded, words catching in her throat. "I should have heard you then." They didn't hug. Didn't reach. They just stood there, a few feet apart, holding all the things time hadn't been able to erase. Grief, guilt, survival, truth. The kind of truth that had lived in pencil on old letters. The kind that never stopped knocking. "I thought I lost you," she said, almost to herself. "I thought I lost me too," he replied. Neither smiled, but something passed between them, something weightless, like the first breath after a long plunge. Outside, the courthouse steps glowed soft with candlelight. No chants tonight. No signs. Just people. Standing still. Remembering. Not mourning, honoring. The names that didn't make headlines. The stories that were cut short or never told. The boys who were never seen until it was too late. James stood by the sidewalk, surrounded but not consumed. Someone handed him a cup of coffee. Someone else patted his shoulder. His eyes scanned the crowd like he couldn't believe he was still here. Like he was still waiting for it to vanish. Darius glanced toward the doors. He'll be okay now. Eleanor followed his gaze. I hope so. They didn't talk about what came next. They didn't make promises they couldn't keep. They just stood there for a moment longer, two lives split by time, rejoined by truth. I kept the letters, she said softly. Darius didn't respond right away. Then, took me years to stop writing them. I never should have stopped reading them, she whispered. Another pause. Then he nodded, once, and that was enough. Outside, the candles kept flickering, small, defiant lights in the dark. Not to mourn what had been lost, but to mark what had finally been seen.